welcome everyone to the session, How Experimentation in Consumer Business Improves Both Business and Customer Outcomes. So some of the questions we'll answer today is, what is an experiment? What do I need to get started? What business and customer outcomes can I expect? And then ultimately, is experimentation right for my business? But before we jump in, just want to do some quick introductions. My name is Andrew Schneider, Principal Product Manager at Our Family Wizard. Been with Our Family Wizard since last May, and then before that, I've worked at a couple other Twin Cities startup companies. And I'm joined with Bridget.
Hi, everyone. Bridget Haymaker, CMO at Our Family Wizard. I spent the first 10 years of my career at Intuit and moved back to Minnesota, where I grew up about 4 years ago, and have been leading product and marketing at a few local startups. So I'll go ahead and just kick us off with a little background on what Our Family is, as I imagine some of you, all of you may not have heard of us just yet. So one of the things I'm personally most excited about is our mission. We help families living separately thrive. That's our formal mission. And generally this means that we're helping two co-parents recently divorced coordinate and communicate with each other in a way that provides a healthy, successful environment for their kids. And in reality, it could actually mean a few different things. It could mean grandparents, aunts, uncles, or other care providers supporting their family in a variety of circumstances. But ultimately, we want them to progress towards a goal or realize a goal despite their circumstances, sort of the definition of thriving. So we very much take this mission to heart when approaching experimentation, whether it's making it easier for families to learn about our product, get into the product, or get to value faster. We're ultimately trying to both grow the business and help more families with those difficult circumstances, overcome them, and live healthier, more productive lives.
Awesome. Thanks, Bridget. I'm going to jump into the first topic, which is what is experimentation? And if you have questions, either put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll look at those at the end and kind of go through and answer those. So first up, what is experimentation? So just before we kind of dive into that, just a quick public service announcement. Throughout the presentation, we'll refer to A/B test and experiment as synonymous. It's the same thing. At Our Family Wizard, we actually started calling them A/B tests, but actually generated some confusion with our QA automation team that run test cases on our production app. So we changed it to experiment. So you kind of see that sprinkled in throughout, but know that A/B test and experiment basically mean the same thing. So, okay, so wanted to start with just some history of A/B testing and how it got started. So it actually started with agriculture. So farmers would choose one field and fertilize it, and choose one field that didn't get the fertilizer and see which one yielded more crops. So that was in the 1920s, really where it all kind of started. Then in the 1950s, it jumped into healthcare with clinical trials. So one group of patients would get a placebo, another group would get the treatment or kind of the new drug or whatever they're testing. And then it jumped into the business world in the 1960s with direct mail. So marketers would test like catalogs or postcards or letters, different types of mail to see which one drove more results. And then in the 90s with the internet, software companies started to do A/B testing, and that's what we'll be covering today is A/B testing at software companies. And then a quick note before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of A/B testing. There are kind of two different types of testing. There's A/B testing and multivariate testing. You can see on the left, A/B testing is basically take the original or the thing that you're doing today and make a change to it called a variation or the B, or we'll call that treatment today as well. And then you test those side by side. So that's A/B testing. And then the other kind of way to do or methodology for testing is multivariate. So that's instead of changing one thing, you launch different variations or different versions of something and test all those simultaneously. Typically what we found is multivariates little bit more advanced and kind of an evolution of A/B testing once you kind of get more sophisticated. So the purpose of today, we'll cover, we're kind of focusing on getting started with experimentation and testing. So we're going to focus on A/B testing, but know that multivariate's kind of like the next level beyond kind of nailing what A/B testing is. So just wanted to call that out before we dive in here. So yeah, and you can kind of see some of the pros and cons here of each individual method as well. So all right, so the kind of core ingredients of A/B testing is really around the kind of main objective of it is to reach statistical significance. And it's kind of a big word, but really what it means is that you have confidence in the outcome that you saw. So it wasn't as a result of chance or luck. And the things that kind of contribute to that, one is called sample size, and we'll kind of run through a few scenarios here in a minute, but just want to at least introduce the concept. So sample size, which is basically a representation of your entire population. The duration is how long the test should run, and basically means how long is it going to take you to get your sample size. And then the other component is your conversion rate, which is basically of the people in the experiment or test, how many of them took the desired action that you're measuring. So again, we'll run through these in more detail so you can kind of see how they work, but that's kind of the core tenets of it. So we'll do a quick example. I'm actually going to stand up a poll here. If you go under polls, you can vote. So this is MSN Real Estate, their Find a House widget. So the success metric is for this one, for this experiment, was revenue to Microsoft generated every time a user clicks the search find button. So you can see the A, which is the control, and the B, which is the treatment. So go in and vote if you think the A performed better, the B performed better, or if they were about the same. And then we can see what the results were. And in terms of like sample size, for example, users that would be bucketed into the experiment would be viewing either the A or the control. Or sorry, A or B, and then the conversion would be actually clicking that search listings on the left or find homes on the right. So from the kind of previous example. So has everyone voted? You can see what the results. So we have 2 votes for A, 4 for B, and 1 for they were both the same. So the actual result was A was better than B, and it was statistically significant. So we'll just pop back over here again. So a good example of why we want to do experiments. Most people thought B was better, right? So kind of to Bridget's point, we want to focus on solving problems for our customers, and we have ideas on how to do that, but we may think that the one on the right is actually better, but users in this scenario told us that the one on the left is actually better. So that's the experiment. Okay, so another kind of scenario to walk through here related to OFW. So we want to experiment with that sign up button in the nav right here. And we'll do 2 scenarios just to kind of illustrate the concepts again. So the first one is changing sign up to get started. And scenario 2 is changing sign up to sign up for a free lunch. So basically, if you sign up, you convert, you get a free lunch associated with it. So just kind of a fun example there. So we'll statistical significance quick. So again, this is basically what your confidence level is in the results being representative of your population. So it wasn't lucky or unlucky, if you will. So for the purposes of this one, we chose, you basically choose different confidence levels. So we chose 80%, which means we're 80% confident the results were not lucky or unlucky. Or lucky, I guess I should say. So you can also choose like 90, 95, 99, just depending on what type of experiment you're running and how much risk you're willing to take that something might actually not be accurate. So we'll choose 80 for this one. And I guess I should say too, the lower the confidence level, the less sample size you need to grab, which we'll get to in a minute. But in terms of conversion rate, we'll calculate that. So let's just assume for argument, 27% of users that land on the home page click that sign up button. It's kind of a big conversion rate, but just for argument's sake. And then we think by changing it to get started, we'll see a 1% lift. That's just a hypothesis that we have. And then in scenario 2, we've done a bunch of research. We think our users really want free lunch, right? So we'll see a 20% lift in that one. So again, that's just kind of guesses at this point before we run the experiment to ultimately calculate our sample size, which is the number of participants in an experiment should be representative of the entire population. A good way to think about that. So our Family Wizard is, majority of our users are in the US. So we do have an international footprint, but it's smaller. But like, let's say we ran an experiment and all the users were from Australia, for example. That wouldn't be a good sample because it's not representative of our kind of entire user base, if that makes sense. There's different laws in Australia, different behaviors, those types of things. So just kind of a real world example there. So to calculate the sample size, this is a tool that Optimizely has created. It's just a calculator, so you can see the different scenarios here. So we've got the baseline conversion rate of 27%, what we think the lift will be, so 1 and 20, and then our statistical significance confidence level target. And you can see the one on the left, we need about 500,000 conversions, if you will, in each variation. So that's about 1 million conversions we're going to need. And then on the right, it's about 600-ish or so. So let's just say for argument's sake, you get about 500 conversions a week. So you can run the one scenario 2 for 2 weeks, get results that are statistically significant. The one on the left, you're actually not going to get results based on that 500 conversions a week for years. So that would be an experiment we wouldn't run. But a good example of that would be like Facebook, for example. They have over a billion, maybe 2 billion at this point, monthly active users. They can get that 500,000 users very quickly. So they could get results on that quickly. So just kind of a good illustration of like the different scales that you need in traffic, and then the types of experiments you should be running depending on your business. So all right, let's jump into what you need to get started. So we kind of walked through this in the last scenario, but basically the components of running experiment: gather baseline data. So that would be the 27% that conversion rate that we gathered on the last one. Form a hypothesis. So that would be like, we did some research and users want a free lunch, for example. And we think if we offer a free lunch with a conversion or sign up, that'll drive more signups. And then design and launch your experiment. So that's your sample size, how long it has to run, what your confidence level is, all those kind of components we ran through. And then lastly, run it, gather the sample, and share the results. And a key piece of that is how you're going to actually measure it, how you're going to bucket users into control and treatment. And at our Family Wizard, we actually started using a tool called Google Optimize. So it's a tool from Google, pretty straightforward. It actually does all the statistical significance calculations for you too. It's a really great place to start. But as we've gotten into more sophisticated experiments and kind of evolved over time, we've actually moved into more custom tech stack there to support our experiments. And we're not really going to dig into that today, but if folks have questions about that, my LinkedIn's, I think, shared in the meeting invite, so feel free to reach out there. But I think in terms of getting started, Google Optimize is a great way to kind of get started and start running your first couple experiments. And then the last piece on what you need to get started is just being willing to fail. Good percentage of experiments are going to fail, and it's actually a key piece of growth and moving different metrics and things and learning. So if you're not comfortable with failure, then experimentation really isn't the right kind of tool for the job there. So yeah, and we'll run through a couple examples later on how we failed and how we adapted and iterated over time. So okay, with that, we'll transition into what business to customer outcomes you can expect. So there's some background here. Since June of last year, we've run about 20 experiments. To the failure point, some have been successful, some have not done as well. Again, it's just part of the kind of process there. We've chosen 3 experiments today that we actually ran. We'll share the results and why we did and what our hypotheses were going in, and then we'll highlight what you can expect in terms of outcomes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bridget to talk through the first experiment.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. All right, so first, before I dig in, want to just give a quick shout out to 2 team members, Kelsey Propsom and Sarah Klemp. I'll be actually representing their work today. Kelsey was planning to present, but actually started her parental leave a little bit early. She's having her first kid in November. So why don't we start with some quick background to provide context on 2 marketing experiments I'll be talking about. So overall, the co-parenting space is pretty fragmented. There's a number of competitive solutions out there, including things like Google Calendar. One of our main competitors is an app called Talking Parents. And in the last couple of years, they've been increasingly marketing themselves as a free tool, even though they charge for a number of common co-parenting needs. So things like downloading PDF reports, messaging their co-parent on a mobile device, and setting SMS notification, getting an SMS notification. So we've observed a couple things internally. One, we've seen that parents switching from Talking Parents have shared some negative experiences associated with being charged unexpected fees through customer feedback channels. We've also heard from judges and other family law attorneys that there's this pretty wide perception that Talking Parents is free, but in reality, that's just not the case. And that lack of transparency really isn't a great outcome for families or the professionals that serve them. So we wanted to start learning about how to best position ourselves against Talking Parents based on that insight. And we decided to start with testing different types of ad copy for people searching for Talking Parents. The idea being that by testing at the very top of the funnel with the highest volume of traffic, so to Andrew's point, large sample size, we could shorten the feedback loop and get learnings really, really quickly. Another fun thing with this experiment, and a bit of a pro tip, Google has this really cool feature called responsive search ads, where they use machine learning to automatically combine different headlines and descriptions of the ad copy to find the highest converting combination. It's almost like running a bunch of A/B tests all at once behind the scenes. So I'll quickly play a few seconds from their voiceover just to give you a little more exposure and background to that.
Responsive search ads simplify the creation and management of search ads to ensure that customers see ads that are customized to what they're searching for. Using the power of machine learning, responsive search ads mix the headlines and descriptions that you provide to automatically test different combinations and learn which perform best. You can turn to optimization score to either implement responsive search ads or improve existing ones. For this video, let's get started by selecting search campaign and clicking the Ads and Extensions tab on the left.
All right, so hopefully that'll give you a good overview. There's plenty of great how-to videos in terms of how to set up responsive search ads, pretty easy, but just a phenomenal tool to get learning more quickly. So let's go into the first experiment. All right, so as Andrew mentioned, you always want to start with a measurable hypothesis. For this first test, we had a hypothesis that by seeding doubt about Talking Parents' free plan and highlighting its hidden fees, we could convince prospects to evaluate Our Family Wizard as an alternative and observe a 10% lift in our primary metric, which in this case was the ad click-through rate, or CTR. Ours at the time with our control was about 8%, which is actually quite good for Google ad click-through rates, but we thought we could improve upon it by really leaning into that insight about hidden fees. So we came up with about 15 headlines and 4 descriptions, which is the maximum number that Google responsive search ads will allow. And here's one example. I'll just read through it quick. Picking a co-parenting app, the high cost of free. Does your co-parenting app have an app? Learn what free apps don't want you to know. What could your free co-parenting app cost? $50 PDF downloads for one. Find out what else. So primary metric was, of course, ad click-through rate, like we talked about. We also wanted to measure the ad to subscription conversion rate because, of course, if that's down but our ad click-through rate's up, it's clear we need to then optimize the landing page experience that follows the ad to make sure that we're ultimately increasing the total number of conversions. So what does everyone think? Do we think it worked? Well, in this case, it totally tanked. So yeah, as Andrew mentioned, got to embrace failure. In this case, we did a face plant, but we had to embrace that. Quick stat, Amazon actually only sees 1/3 of their experiments result in test winners. So kind of just the cost of doing business, cost of experimentation. And the important thing is to keep going and learn from it and iterate on top of it. So that brings us to experiment B. This time we shifted our hypothesis a bit. We focused more on highlighting Our Family Wizard as a proven long-term solution that has its customers' best interests at heart, and really leaned into one of our brand values, which is trust. We worked really hard to build trust with our families, and felt like emphasizing that might actually improve the ad click-through rate. So this time we only tested 2 descriptions so we could have better control over how they read when they were combined. Here's one example: track your parenting plan, best app for co-parents talking, skip the false promises of free tools, use the co-parenting app that truly has your back. 4.7 stars with 14K app reviews, trusted by thousands of families since 2001. Same metrics, and this time, great success, 38% improvement in click-through rate. And so this one's really fun, I think, because we ultimately were able to improve CTR, but I think more so proud of the way that the team sort of embraced the failure of a less than ideal outcome that first time around, and really leaned into learning and continue to iterate to ultimately find success.
Awesome. Let's jump into the next one. Okay, so experiment 2, some context on Our Family Wizard. So we have 2 parents that use the product. We call them parent A, parent B. So parent A is basically the first parent to register, and then they add their parent B in the registration flow. So this experiment, we wanted to really improve or kind of overhaul the parent A registration, and some more context. So with Our Family Wizard, we don't offer like a free trial or freemium or anything. So you basically have to pay, convert, and then you get access to your account. So we used to ask security, like a couple security questions, and actually create a security pin in registration. So we thought we could move those actually post-purchase, after the account's created. And then the other piece of this experiment was we had some data that a good percentage of our registrations were actually doing it on mobile web. We don't support acquisition or basically registration through the App Store today. So a lot of parents were signing up on a mobile device through mobile web. So we wanted to really kind of shake up the design a little bit, and really optimize that for mobile web. And we felt like if we did those 2 things, we could see a 10% lift in parent A registrations. Some of the insights there, we looked at, there's a framework called Jobs to be Done, which is really helpful in kind of understanding customer needs and what the product is trying to do. And our key insight there is, again, it's not revolutionary when you're signing up for things on the internet, but really less form fields, less friction, cleaner design. Those are going to drive more people through to successful registrations. I'll run through the test plan in a minute here. You can actually see the mock-ups for what it looked like. And then the KPI was really parent A registration. So so on the left is the control, so what the existing experience looked like, and then the right is the treatment. So you can see we just kind of cleaned up the UI, cleaned up some of the copy as well, just to make it a little bit clearer so that parents can find their way into the registration. And then really on the first step here, you can start to see the mobile web. This is a desktop screenshot, but on mobile web, it's kind of adapts to the screen size. So start to see, how the design is really making it easier on mobile web. Cleaned up the package step, as well, and then the payment step. So a couple examples there, what it looked like. And then in terms of results, we actually saw a 15% lift, and we chose 80% confidence just to kind of get the results faster with that. So we actually rolled that out to 100%. And I think it's important to call out to, kind of, we talked about our mission and why we experiment and things like that. And it was a good business outcome, but really at the end of the day, if you look through the results again, we made it easier for parents. We removed friction, made it easier for them to make it through this kind of registration flow here. So I think at the end of the day, that's really what drove those results. So so that's what we try to focus on, from a customer standpoint, how we can ultimately make things easier and then drive those good business outcomes too. So moving on to the third experiment, which is moving the billing address. So I don't know if you saw it up above here. We actually asked for the billing address here on that first step. So basically that's 7 fields. So we were thinking if we remove that, we'll get more parents completing that first registration step. And some context on this experiment too. We had right now we only support credit card payments, and so we had a hypothesis to kind of overhaul our payment step to support like PayPal, alternative payment methods, some of the buy now, pay later stuff like Sezzle, for example. We wanted to try, but in order to do that, this is kind of a precursor to moving the billing address from that step 1 to the payment step. So a little bit more in context, and then we can work with our design team to say, hey, let's kind of rethink our payment step with all these different kind of components there. So the goal was really to drive more registrations in that first step. Secondary one was actual parent A registrations to see if we get more people completing that first step, will that actually drive more registrations? Yeah, I'll run through the test plan quick here. So you can see really shortened up what that first step looks like by moving that billing address to the payment step with a little bit more context. So in terms of results, we did see a 14% lift, 8% confidence in that first registration step, although the actual parent A registrations were flat. So that kind of plays into our hypothesis to overhaul the payment steps. That's actually something we're working on right now, is looking at alternative payment methods and how we can kind of solve more problems on that payment step as well. But we ended up rolling this out to 100% just because we want to continue to iterate on the payment steps. We want to get more parents through the flow to that payment step to then continue to experiment and improve that flow as well. So those are the 3 examples of the experiments we've done. Again, happy to answer questions at the end here, but just to kind of recap. So what is an experiment? The goal is really statistical significance. Again, kind of a fancy word, but really just being confident in the changes you're making are not lucky or unlucky. Key pieces of that are sample size, duration, so how long to run the test to get your sample size, and then the conversion rate. So did the folks in each variation take the intended, or what percentage of the folks in the experiment took the intended action that you were testing? What do I need to get started? So get some baseline data to understand kind of how your funnel or whatever you're testing is performing today, form a hypothesis, and then start to design and launch your experiment, gather sample and share results. Recapping kind of what business customer outcomes to expect. Again, for us at least, it kind of ties back to the mission. And I think the MSN example showed a good example too of, we think we'll test things that we think are good for our customers and our users, but we might actually be wrong. So that's why we want to run those experiments and then ultimately solve problems, provide value for our customer base. And over time, we'll start to see the customers, the subscription or number of customers subscribing go up, right? And if we're misleading customers or getting the wrong ones that won't find value in the product, then they'll kind of churn out and those numbers will go down. So we want to make sure that we're focusing on providing value to the folks that would find value in the product, I guess. So that's something we really pay close attention to, is at the core of why we experiment. And then last but not least, these were kind of sprinkled in, but just to call them out, for is experimentation, right, for my business. The first one is making sure you have enough traffic to reach statistical significance. Again, without getting statistical significance, there's really no reason to experiment. If you're a little bit of a smaller company than, say, like a Facebook or a Netflix, really making sure that you're choosing, really making sure your traffic's there to reach that stat sig. And then kind of goes hand in hand with it too, with the scenario we walked through with the free lunch, but making sure that you're willing to test hypotheses that will drive a big impact. So just changing like button colors or things like that, if you don't have a lot of traffic, really won't yield statistical significant results in a timely manner, which is key for experimentation, so you can keep iterating over time. And then the third one, again with the treadmill gift, but it's just willingness to fail. And I think Bridget's example really highlighted that too, of you can fail in the first one and then iterate based on what you learn and have a big success. And actually, I think that's part of the journey of kind of experimenting and why we do it too. Can't really have those big wins without some failure. So that was it. Any questions from folks? I guess we can look at the chat. Or if there's Q&A. Any other questions for folks? If you want to, feel free to post them in the chat and Bridget and I can answer them. Not seeing any here. Anything else you have, Bridget, to cover or comments that we missed?
No, just happy to go deeper or provide answers on any questions outside of this too. I think everyone has our LinkedIn profile information, so feel free to message us. Because yeah, this is ultimately, it takes some time to learn. It definitely took me some time to learn, and happy to share the knowledge I've picked up.
Looks like Andy has a question. Curious how you guys think through different testing points in the funnel. Do you start closest to revenue or start with top of funnel, i.e. increasing traffic? That's a good question. Bridget, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I've tended to start actually at the top of the funnel. So when I ran growth for QuickBooks Online, we had some hypotheses for what we thought were the biggest benefits to focus on in first-time use, but actually ended up doing some dry testing with website traffic to better glean that and get a better handle from a quantitative perspective to focus those efforts. So yeah, I think starting at the top of the funnel with the highest traffic, if you can, it is a great approach because it generally can accelerate your learnings. Anything to add, Andrew?
No, that was good. So Peter asked about the tech stack. We can cover that. So yeah, we started off with Google Optimize, and then that kind of quickly evolved into needing something a little bit more robust. So we actually transitioned to a tool called Launch Darkly. So it's kind of a feature flagging tool as well, or a rollout tool, as well as it can assign treatment control. So basically you can create a Launch Darkly flag and say, 50% of users go into treatment, 50% go into control. So that tool kind of does the routing for us. And we just embed that right into the code on our product. And then we once that assignment happens, we use Segment as our kind of customer data platform. So we'll fire off an event that says, this user was bucketed into treatment. We'll have a bunch of detail about what the experiment was and the timestamp and all that. And then we've got, basically the registration funnel and the website instrumented so that we can see the different kind of drop-off points, what package they selected, things like that. So that at the end of the experiment, we'll sit down, pull that data and analysis together and see, by treatment, by control, what the conversions were there. So that's kind of how we use that today. Happy to elaborate more on that as well. So, but I think Google Optimize is a really good way to start and then kind of as you need to mature the tech stack, moving into some tools like I mentioned. Bridget, anything that you used at Intuit or QuickBooks?
We used homegrown stuff. We were pretty mature. So yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate for getting started scenario.
Yeah. Another tool I guess we use that we find really helpful is it's called LogRocket. So you can view sessions or user sessions. So you can start to see, you know, this user in treatment dropped off on, say, the package step. You can go in and actually watch that too. So we have that all kind of hooked up as well. So those help make sure that you can kind of see what the customer's seeing, if that makes sense. So cool. Any other questions?
I see one. Besides Google doing anything in the landing page product tool wise, I think I understand this question. So outside of Google Ads, from a marketing perspective, we are absolutely doing a lot of testing from a landing page perspective. We're actually pretty nascent when it comes to creating dedicated landing pages for all of our search terms. And so we initially started a few months ago with some of the highest volume keywords in particular that are higher intent. So co-parenting app is a pretty big one for us. We started there, again, optimized for the most traffic to accelerate learning, and ended up seeing about a 14% lift versus sending traffic to our homepage, you know, with something that's very focused, especially on the keyword. And yeah, lots more to do there. And then product tool wise, Andrew, I suspect you can probably cover that.
In terms of what, Bridget?
I would guess it's more onboarding related, like the actually experimenting with the product.
Oh, got it. Yeah, again, I think that would kind of fall into the tech stack and covered product tool wise.
Cool.
Looks like we have another one under Q&A. As a product team, how do you identify items you would like to test and weigh them against development costs? That's a really good question. I don't know, Bridget, if you have thoughts from your experience on that one.
Oh, I wish this person could say more. As a product team, how do you identify items you would like to test and weigh them against the development costs? Yeah, okay. So I think general rule of thumb, you're trying to lean startup principles, right? You're trying to learn as quickly as you can with the lowest amount of development. I've definitely seen, especially when testing onboarding flows or first time use changes, there's definitely higher development associated there. So again, I would, as much as possible, start with lower development related items, higher in the funnel to kind of maximize learning, especially around, in particular, which benefits to focus on. And then from there, you'll have much more informed hypotheses and can better prioritize the development. So yeah, ultimately with QuickBooks Online, we got enough learning at the top of the funnel around what benefits new QuickBooks Online prospects cared about. It was primarily how to get organized with tax time by connecting your bank, pulling in all of your expense data, categorizing it for tax purposes. That was very applicable to the majority of folks signing up. And then getting paid, sending an invoice and getting paid was the second highest, but that's pretty specific to project-based businesses. So we ended up spending 6 months optimizing those two workflows based on that sort of top of funnel data, if that makes sense. But yeah, great question. Really tricky balance. Yeah.
I would say too, in that third example that we walked through, you know, we had wanted to overhaul the payment step. And we could have run that as an experiment where we moved the billing address and overhauled the payment step, but that experiment could have lost, right? And then we spent all that time moving the billing address over for really no reason. So you can kind of actually use it. We've used it too to kind of inform the roadmap and kind of iteratively test our way into assumptions about development cost too. So like if once we ran that experiment, we were more confident in overhauling the payment step, we should include the billing address there. So you can kind of use it strategically as well to help inform where you should make those development and engineering investments as well.